welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast, produced in partnership with the A.B. Korkor Foundation for Mental Health. I'm Terry, the creator and co-host of this podcast. I've lived with depression most of my life, and I know how easy it can be to feel all alone in the experience. I'm not alone, and you aren't either.
And I'm Dr. Anita Sands, a licensed clinical psychologist and life coach with a number of my own diagnoses, all of which bring a certain amount of anxiety and depression along with them. There is great power in shared experiences. We share our own as we engage in intimate and candid conversations with our weekly guests, exploring different perspectives on and experiences with depression.
We keep it real because depression is real. We keep it hopeful because there truly is hope, in spite of what depression tells you. Hello, Anita.
Hi, Terry. Today, we continue our conversation with Michelle Yang. When she was 9 years old, her family immigrated to the U.S. from Korea. No one in her family spoke English, and as Michelle shared in last week's episode, that meant her parents' career opportunities were limited, and that she was required to take on many stressful responsibilities not normally assigned to a child of her age. And in her teens, Michelle began to experience symptoms of mental illnesses. Unfortunately, no one in her life, at her school or in her home, responded to even blatant warning signs, dismissing her either because of stigma, ignorance, or the fact that she did not fit the mold of what they thought a depressed person looks like.
As if there's a mold. So that is where we will pick up our conversation today with Michelle. We begin with a telling example that she referenced in last week's episode. Here again is Michelle Yang, giving her voice to depression. If you're thinking that Michelle's cries for help were subtle and easy to miss, the story she's about to share will have you thinking again, like this one. Michelle, a gifted and capable student, was taking an exam in high school. Because of what was going on in her mind and body, instead of doing the required math calculations, she doodled all over the test paper, covering it with what she calls gibberish and pictures, and then she turned it in. Did her teacher show concern? Bring Michelle's out-of-character behavior to the guidance counselor, her parents, or someone else who might be able to help? No.
She actually let me retake it. That's the thing. If you're a good student, you can get away with a lot.
And while that may have helped Michelle with her grades and plan to earn a full scholarship to a prestigious college, it in no way addressed the problems that would eventually lead to her having to withdraw from that college.
And that's what I, in my advocacy work now, try to instill in people. Good grades does not equal good mental health. I think that gets so confused by so many people, where people think if you have good grades, if you're active in extracurricular activities, which I was super involved in everything because I really wanted that scholarship to college to fund my own education. And so I think that's also a lot of added pressure, but I was really involved. And so if you're only using those two as markers of a person's wellness, it's ridiculous, right? You wouldn't say, oh, this person has really good grades and is a really good soccer player, so hence they could never get cancer. And so that's ridiculous. But yet we use that same logic for mental health.
So when and how were you diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed when I was 20. I went to college on a scholarship, like I said, and my scholarship also paid for study abroad. And I had gone to study abroad in my junior year to China, to Beijing. And it was, I think, a lot of circumstances that came together that resulted in probably my worst episode ever. I felt lonely there. Once I fell into the depression, I don't have to tell you, right? It kind of spirals, and I wasn't leaving my room much anymore, my dorm room, and not even to eat.
It was the end of the term. Final exams were looming. Michelle was on the edge, stressed, depressed, and depleted, when even more pressure was added with a call from her father in the U.S.
And he asks me to run an errand for him in a neighboring province that requires an overnight train. And this is like my last week of school. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm already doing all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't possibly take a train. Yeah, take a train to this other province. And, you know, he wanted me to buy these DVDs for him that were for my dad was working on his own degree. And that was like educational DVDs. And I was like, I can't possibly. And he would not take no for an answer. And I'm not used to saying no to my dad. Mm-hmm. Right. And I felt so bad already. When you are depressed, you feel so low. You feel so worthless. You feel like you're not like worth the air you breathe. You're not worth, you know. You do. Yeah. And so when he commanded me, I felt like, well, I'm so worthless. I need to at least do this for him. Right. And so I mustered all the energy that I could. And I like remember like willing myself, like I must do this. I must. And like it's something switched from depression to mania. And I think it's the only time in my past, like about 20 plus years of living with this condition that like I can almost like pinpoint the moment of going from depression to mania, you know? And so it was like 2 a.m. when I ran out of my dorm and went to this province to try to do this thing. And I was like completely out of my mind.
To this day, now in her 40s, Michelle still describes it as a miracle that she got back to her dorm safely. Safe, but not sound. Michelle was in crisis. This time, people did finally notice. The program director called her father and sounded an alarm, telling him to catch the next flight to Beijing and to bring Michelle home.
And he showed up 2 days later, and I opened the door, and he just like crumpled into my arms, and he was sobbing, you know, because of course, like, I'm not trying to paint anyone as a villain. Like he thought I could do this. He demanded this of me, even though I said no, because he thinks that I am capable of doing anything, and he wants, you know, and this was important to him. So he thought it was important enough to push me, but he didn't think that it would push me over the edge, right?
Michelle says she was hospitalized with a full psychotic episode. She was later diagnosed with bipolar I disorder, or what used to be called manic depression. According to Johns Hopkins, bipolar I affects about 1% of the population in the U.S. There's often a 5 to 10 year lag between onset of symptoms and correct diagnosis, because patients are often initially diagnosed with and treated for major depressive disorder, only receiving the correct diagnosis after a later manic episode. Michelle could not finish school in that condition. It would take time and several tries to find the right meds before she was stabilized. To this day, she is grateful to her therapist for advising her to take a leave of absence, because she says without that guidance, she would never have even realized that was an option, let alone one that would serve her well in the end.
Absolutely, yeah, because honestly, when you're going through it, you just think everything is the end of the world. Right?
Yes.
Right? And so you just think, oh my gosh, my life is over. It's the end of the world. I've just messed everything up. I can't come back from this. Who can come back from this? Nobody can come back from this. Like that's the spiral, right? It's like my life is over is the spiral. And so for somebody to kind of stop you, shake you and go like, it's going to be okay. You can take a break. You know, and then you can kind of like slip back into school when no one really notices, mm-hmm. You know, and that's what happened. I took a break.
After that much needed break and care, Michelle was well enough to return to school. She not only finished her degree, but graduated with the highest possible distinction awarded. She continued school and earned a master's degree in business. Michelle worked some high-powered, high-level jobs. She fell in love, married, and started a family. She found her voice and the determination to share the story of her mental health journey in support groups to educate and encourage other people with bipolar disorder. But at work, she didn't tell anyone about her diagnosis and experiences. until she realized that, in her words, she was feeding into the shame cycle.
I was in a period of, career growth as well, and really like reflecting on like what's holding me back, like what's holding me back from being confident in the workplace and being the best self that I can be at work. And I realized that it's the cost of keeping my illness a secret, right? Because it kept me at bay with all my colleagues. I never fully trusted them. It was a self-imposed, self-defeating spiral, like due to the fear of stigma. Like I had this fear of rejection, that if they knew I lived with a mental illness, that they would never see me the same way again, that they would not trust me with the projects, that it would limit my career advancement opportunities, or that they would just possibly reject me altogether.
In challenging her fear, Michelle is also challenging stigma and all of the misunderstandings it feeds.
Our lives are not ruled by our mood swings. Mm-hmm. I think there's this misconception that like, oh, if you're going to be around a person with bipolar disorder, they're going to be so volatile and they're just completely unpredictable all of the time. And it's like, that is not the case. Yeah, I try to think of other physical ailments that it would be ridiculous, right? Of like a person who is diabetic, who has diabetes, if you think that they're just going to pass out at any moment throughout the day, Right. No, of course they're not. They're on insulin, they're on medication, they're on a special diet. Like they're doing all these things to manage so that they won't just pass out in a meeting, Mm-hmm. And yet for some reason, for bipolar disorder, they expect this of us, that they expect that there's no delineation.
Just this constant roller coaster.
Yeah, this constant roller coaster, that there's like no treatment that actually works. So like, I think that's one. And if I can give you another one that Please. Also really irks me. So there are people who, especially like my parents' generation, who might live with a mental health condition who, due to stigma that they grew up with mm-hmm. and denial, that never received treatment, right? And so then the way that they behaved toward their children caused a lot of harm. But not making room for the distinction between people who got diagnosed, got help, got better, versus people who were unable to get help.
Or afraid to.
Or afraid to. Yeah, their help was, in whatever reason, inaccessible to them.
Having finally accessed help and being determined to break the cycles that denied it for so long, Michelle says she is proud to be herself, her whole self. And she uses a great metaphor to describe what letting it all hang out is like.
I realized that it was like sucking in your gut for 20 years, right?
Yes. Trying to look better.
Like, no, I'm actually really skinny. See, I'm just sucking in, like, which is impossible, right?
Yes.
Like you can't,
that is a really good metaphor.
And not comfortable or healthy.
No.
And so I decided to come out with it. And become a mental health advocate and write. And I realized the cycle needed to end, because by me staying silent, then the only narratives that are out there are the ones of people dying by suicide, because those people can't hide because they're in crisis, and so then that's why there's a singular narrative in society. For us to change that, then people who are doing well need to come out and say, look, I've lived for 20 years with bipolar disorder and I've managed it well. I hold a job and I'm a great mom and I'm a normal person like you, that's what can break down the stigma. Yeah. I'm never been happier, than now that I can finally breathe out and let it all hang. Right? My gut is out. Yeah.
It's her authentic selves, right?
Uh-huh.
You're all those amazing things, and you
mm-hmm.
live with bipolar disorder.
Exactly. It doesn't define me.
So this is a story that I think is important to hear. All the many, 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 many challenges that Michelle had, but also that she has been living with bipolar disorder for 20 years, and that she has built a successful life and career and family, and that none of that was limited by her diagnosis.
And that she had the courage and felt that it was necessary to come out and let there be a visible example of a person with bipolar disorder who was not showing, signs of active mania in the workplace, let's say. Because, I'll guarantee you that you know someone in your family, your neighborhood community, your school, your workplace. You know someone right now who has a diagnosable mental illness, who has never told you. You know many people, if we look at the statistics, many people with a diagnosable mental illness who's never told you. And it's probably not the people who you think.
Right.
And likely because Michelle's a great example. When it's been diagnosed, when it's managed well, when people have accepted that and they're working with it and they've got the resources that they need to be able to do that, you likely, as a person that they are working with, or, you're in the PTA with, or what, you're not going to know.
Right.
And I think that, unfortunately, one of the reasons stigma can be so large is because if the only examples of people with mental illness that we know of are people who are in active crisis, then we think that's what mental illness is. And mental illness is living successfully with depression, with bipolar disorder, with schizophrenia, with anxiety, with panic disorder, with PTSD, with so many different conditions. And just like your friends, your family members, your neighbors, your coworkers are doing, and you don't even know it.
Right. That's why I'm so grateful when someone like Michelle becomes a mental health advocate.
Yes.
Because you would not think the top student in your class and the young woman who earned an MBA and the mother, and she has a great laugh and a great sense of humor, that all of those things, if you were to list what someone with bipolar 1, presents as, probably wouldn't be that list. So it's really important that we see both. And those other things are also real.
Yes.
The mania and the depression are also very, very real things. Yeah. But they, as she said in the end of this episode, don't define her.
They do not. Your mental illness does not define you, just like your diabetes does not define you if you have diabetes. So I love Michelle's story. As painful as it was for her to share that, I love that she was willing to do it. We need more Michelles. We need more, we need more platforms for Michelle to be able to have a voice like that.
Yes. I'm going to pull up her last email and just get the name of her memoir that she just did.
Oh, cool. Oh, I will get it.
Yeah. And there we go. The memoir is called Phoenix Girl, How a Fat Asian Girl with Bipolar Found Love. And she says it is forthcoming in 2024 from Fifth Avenue Press. So we are going to link, since it's not out yet, to just her website, which is Michelle Yang, Yang, writer.com. And she's also on Instagram, and it's a very good follow.
Fabulous.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate you sharing your story, and you got at least 2 orders coming for your memoir.
Yep.
Thanks, Anita.
Thanks, Terry. We truly hope that our podcast brings a little more understanding, helps you better articulate and reflect on your own experience with depression, or better understand how to support someone else who is struggling.
If this episode has been of comfort or value to you, know that there are hundreds of others like it in our archive, which you can easily find at our website, givingvoice-to-depression.com. And remember, if you're struggling, speak up, even if it's hard. If someone else is struggling, take the time to listen.